What I wanted to do was I wanted to tell you, and I already did, what's happening after this one, and this. So if you want to tweet, that's cool. And if you didn't know, we did the feed magnet deal. You can tweet, and it'll come up automatically over there at the box office. It's really cool. What gives me pleasure to bring in some really cool people, and all I'll do right now is I'll introduce Christopher Kelly of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And Fort Worth Star-Telegram's awesome partner with Lone Star International Film Festival, and they really have helped to make this festival become what it is over the last 5 years. So it gives me pleasure to introduce him, and he will introduce Dana. Thanks.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I'm loud. I don't really need a mic, but thank you guys for coming out. We will we'll keep this fun and casual and try to get everybody involved. But I want to bring down Dana Harris. Dana actually was not born in Fort Worth, but got here as soon as she could, and graduated from Southwest High School, and has where did you go to college? I know this, and I can't remember.
Austin College in Sherman, Texas.
You've told me that before, and has since gone on to an illustrious career at Variety and now IndieWire, where she is the editor-in-chief. Do I have the title right?
Yep.
And Dana's back in town for the weekend for the festival. So I know it said like film criticism today in the program book, and I read that and I was like, oh God, that sounds sort of ponderous. So we're gonna keep this totally loosey-goosey and let you guys kind of guide the way, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in movies now and what's been interesting us, and maybe you can tell us what you want to hear, and we'll just kind of keep it completely informal. So. Yeah.
So on the film criticism note, something I wanted to kind of start out with is something that's just on top of mind for me is last week a good friend of mine who's a really well-respected journalist emailed me and said, hey, I've got this friend of mine who's looking for some advice. He wants to become a film critic. And I thought maybe you could help. And I was all like, because this person's a good friend of mine, I just wrote back and said, I'm doing everything I can to not give you some kind of snarky reply, because to ask about trying to develop a career as a film critic at this point is a little bit like asking how to become a buggy whip manufacturer. It's something that is those who are fortunate enough to have...
Ironically, that was my plan B, so
yeah.
now I'm screwed.
Yeah. It's something that... it's like there are those who are fortunate enough to be in the role, but as Christopher and I both know, we know lots of people who have been laid off from their roles as film critics because the media industry is in turmoil, and because film criticism is an evolving beast. It's not something that is, when I was growing up, it was like you had your icons, your Pauline Kaels and your Roger Eberts, and these were sort of the people that you would look up to, and there would be tons and tons of regional critics. And now, when I was getting ready to go to Sundance last year, I was talking to a publicist, and they were looking at us like, at IndieWire, like fresh meat, because we are one of the very few outlets left that still does original criticism. And when all the regional critics, to a large degree, have been decimated. I mean, it's like truly you are a rare breed.
Yeah, there's just a handful of us. There's folks in Chris Wagner in Dallas and people in Chicago and Miami, but there's not a lot of people outside of New York and LA who work for daily newspapers or magazines who are doing this for a living, yeah. But I think there is a good side of all this, which is that out of this has emerged a whole, fertile ground on the internet in places like IndieWire and Movie City News and Deadline and blogs like that.
Oh yeah, and it's not like the criticism's gone away at all. In fact, there's more critics than ever. The issue is the providers of that criticism. I mean, how do you see your role in that environment? Because now it's like where there used to be, say, 200 critics, there's now 2,000, 200,000, right. Because there's all these, because there are Movie City News, there are the voices you see on forums, there's your friends who tweet to you 10 minutes after the movie started whether they think it's good or not.
I find it exasperating because I can't go into a movie without knowing what I'm supposed to think about it, and I hate that. It's one thing to read a review, but it's another to hear this like cacophony of opinions, and I found this with The Tree of Life. Like within minutes of that screening in Cannes, I was here in the States, but they showed it the same day here in the States.
That's right, yeah.
Within minutes, it was like, okay, this is what you're supposed to think of it. No, this is what you're supposed to think of it. And everybody kind of like, they're like one line. No one's bothering to think about the movie, and I find that very exasperating. In terms of, but at the same time, I'm trying to be optimist. I'm trying to be sanguine about this because I think there are very interesting voices out there, more non-professional voices, and it makes a sort of more interesting debate. People kind of come at it from different directions. And things that wouldn't get championed, I think, in the past do get championed, are more likely to find a champion, I guess I'll say.
Well, I mean, it's like, how do you see your role in this? Because, you're.
It's like an episode of Survivor, and I'm still on this island.
But no, in terms of like, you write for the Star Telegram, you have, your however many column inches that you have in a given week. How do you feel like your role has changed in terms of what you're supposed to be doing as a critic now as you were, say, maybe 5 years ago?
I think that's a good question. I don't know if I've thought about that too much. I mean, I think people still want to read movie reviews. They still want to engage with someone whom they can see and talk to and maybe, come to an event like this and ask questions of. So I think there's great value in having these kinds of voices at local newspapers. But I will say I probably, in terms of how the role's changed a little bit, I think I don't necessarily see it as kind of a voice from on high coming down anymore. I think I'm sort of more democratic in my approach and probably more willing to take seriously non-professional voices. I think the playing field's been kind of evened out a little bit, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So I know there's a lot of critics who are like holding on to their perch and want people to listen to them, but I think we just live in an era now where everybody's a little bit of a critic. Everybody's voice gets heard. The strongest voices kind of still do rise to the top, and that's how it will always be. But it's a more sort of boisterous era, I guess. I guess that's what the internet has created.
Well, I mean, there's we were talking about this a little bit outside. I mean, there are like the old school critics, like the Jay Hobermans, and the new school critics like Armand White, who delights in taking contrary views. I mean, he was calling Jack and Jill like he's comparing it to Preston Sturges.
That makes me want to see Jack and Jill.
You first. But I mean, it's like, but in terms of your, in terms of being democratic, are you on Twitter? Are you?
I am. Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I don't tweet as often as I should, according to my boss. But yeah, no, I mean, and we're quicker now. Like we don't have a lot of time to think about things. We get things online as soon as we humanly can. We probably pay less attention to embargoes. I don't think anybody pays attention to embargoes anymore. We just kind of want those reviews out there. We want to try to get hits out there, and you want to, you want to be commenting. You want to be answering the people commenting on the reviews, and I think that's all a good thing. I mean, I think it's all about creating a culture of debate, which is what a critic should be doing. I do think, though, we were talking about this before. I do think the sort of leveling of the profession has kind of laid bare certain things, which is that I'm not sure some critics were ever really had an audience. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, I'm not sure anybody.
I mean, like kind of like the Emperor, Emperor has no clothes.
A little bit, and I think, yeah, like we talk about this at the newspaper all the time. It's like we were in an era where whatever we said went. We put it in the paper. We were the authoritarians. We didn't really get feedback. Yeah, there's letters from the editor and such, but we don't really know, and we didn't really know, and we didn't really believe if we were doing something wrong or if what we were doing wasn't really interesting to people. And now we know that immediately. If we put up a story on our website, we know exactly how many people have looked at it.
And they will tell you what they think of it.
And they'll tell you what they think of it. And I think that this doesn't just relate to criticism, this relates to the entire journalism profession. I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, you don't want a world that's purely driven by ratings, but it's important to know if you're reaching people and connecting with people. So
yeah, I mean,
I mean, you guys get through at IndieWire, you know exactly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm
the metrics of every
story.
Yeah,
I watch live traffic. I mean, I literally will put up a story, and we have a thing called Chartbeat, and I will go look and see exactly how many people are on it and watch it rise and fall, and I'll place it on the site depending on where it's, on its placement. But it's very funny, when I was at Variety, and the internet was starting to really make itself known, and they couldn't just they kept trying to brush it off for years, like, oh, wait, kid, you bother me, just like, and then finally it was like, no, this is really serious, and I was trying to get them to pay attention to traffic, and they were offended that I even made the suggestion, because it's like, why, we know better.
We're above it, yes.
We're above this.
We're the guardians,
Variety.
yeah.
And it's just like, well, actually, your name says Variety, but it's like you're nothing without your readers.
Yeah. Well, and I think to sort of extrapolate that to film criticism, it's like, I do think there's a little bit of arrogance sometimes in the kind of films that are covered, in the kind of column inches that are given to certain movies that the critic may believe passionately in them, but nobody else is going to pay attention to them. We were talking about Drive before, a movie that only film critics liked. Any normal person saw that movie and was like, what is this? This is terrible, myself included. And yet, that's the kind of situation where, back in the day, people would have said, "Oh, people would have wrung their hands and said, why didn't the audience see this critically acclaimed film?" Now, now the audience sort of drives that conversation and says, why are the critics such fools for sending us to this movie?
Well, there's something else too. It's like, IndieWire, we specialize in trying to basically make sense of independent film. That's that's kind of I feel like what our mandate is. It's like we may champion some really obscure films, but the thing I always try to go for is don't make it difficult. Don't, we had a quote from Jay Hoberman in a piece this week. It was a debate between Jay Hoberman and Amy Taubin, and he was describing Lars von Trier's work as sub-Strindbergian. And I was just like, what? I know what you mean. I know who Strindberg is, but it's just like, no one talks like that except for Jay Hoberman. But the Jay Hoberman, moments aside, we really do try to avoid that. We try to we don't want to dumb it down, because the reason people go to us is because they want to know about these films. This is the home for it. We're not going to review Jack and Jill unless we're going to be able to make some kind of, I don't know, maybe we'll do some kind of contrast to Strindberg in it. But it's like, but that's not going to be our world.
I guess so. Like, in my mind, like, I think what we're seeing now is like readers know the BS now.
Yeah.
Internet users, they can call out the BS. They can say, sub-Strindbergian, what the F are you talking about? This movie's boring.
Yeah.
The translation, a bunch of people sitting around being depressed for 2.5 hours. And I think that's kind of what this new guard represents. And I don't, I wish more people had jobs and could make their living more easily, certainly, but I kind of welcome this more democratic kind of boisterous
What do you think
era.
of like the Rotten Tomatoes of the world? Are you on Rotten Tomatoes?
Yeah, somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in terms of the, it's like Rotten Tomatoes aggregates probably thousands of
Oh
critics?
yeah. And you can go and know exactly, sort of the range of something. Is it 80% of people liked it, 20%? And I think people use that as a kind of quick tool. I don't think that's any different, though, than back in the day you'd open up People Magazine or Entertainment Weekly and say, oh, this got an A or this got a B. It's just a bigger version of that. So.
But at a certain point, though, there's also the issue of like when you're aggregating that many voices, it really becomes harder to move the needle, and also kind of any subtleties can get lost in translation.
Oh yeah, no, and there'll be wasn't there like one person on the planet who didn't like Toy Story 3?
Right.
But that person might have a really interesting take on Toy Story 3 that's getting drowned out, in the chorus. But I don't know, is that any different from how it used to be?
To me, the thing we're getting ready to relaunch our Critic Wire site, which we've had for a long time, which is it's an aggregator as well, but it focuses a lot more on films that are coming out from the festivals, and so we get early reviews of a lot of things, and it's and we're trying to and we obviously focus more on independent films. And one of the things that we're trying to do in this relaunch is figure out how we can continue that aggregation, but also have more conversation.
Yeah.
So you have some transparency about the thoughts behind
Yeah,
it.
and the nuances. I would rather see a movie that one person loved like nobody's business than a movie that 10 people thought was pretty good. And I think that's what gets lost there.
Yeah.
The real sort of passionate, defense of Jack and Jill. Maybe Jack and Jill's awesome, and someone needs to tell me that. I think that's what critics can do well is point you to something that everybody else has dismissed, and say, no, pay attention to this, that's what's kind of in danger of being lost when you get all of these voices aggregated, because that voice just is the outlier on the curve, right? I mean, it's just the one rotten tomato in a sea of fresh tomatoes. And
Right.
It's likely to be ignored.